Welcome to Getting the Most Out of Class, Freshman Seminar presentation. To get the most out of class, you really need to start preparing ahead of time. Of course, one of the most obvious things is to pay attention to your course syllabus and be looking at your schedule to see when various assignments are due, what reading you need to do before the class, and make sure that you're prepared for quizzes and exams so that none of those pop up and surprise you. You also want to make sure then that you actually do the reading, because that's going to help you get ready for class. And the more you're exposed to that information, the better it will sink in. As you prepare, keep in mind that some instructors will post supplemental material or the PowerPoints and the outlines for class ahead of time. You can go ahead and print them off, look at them, and have them for use in your class. You can also warm up for class a little bit. And that is just go back and review things, review your readings, the chapter intros and the summaries really, and look at some previous class notes. And you also want to make sure that you're ready and organized for class. So maybe have separate binders in different colors and be ready. That's what I do as an instructor. When you enter class then, I recommend practicing mindfulness. And this is a technique that lots of research is showing is extremely helpful. And I encourage you to look up some links and look at other supplemental materials on how better to do this. Again, I find this really helps me quite a bit from being distracted and help me really focus on what I need to do. So mindfulness is having that moment-to-moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, body sensations, and surrounding environment. So paying attention really closely to what's going on around us and really being aware of what our minds are doing. So when we do that, it's not necessarily dismissing distractions, but by being aware of distractions, often they will go away just by recognizing that they are distractions. There are some good reasons to practice mindfulness. It has a good emotional effect. Also, it helps the immune system, which is really a nice plus. And again, it helps us concentrate and focus on what we need to focus on at any given time, while also strengthening. Practicing mindfulness, of course, you can get into some really advanced techniques, but on a basic level, just try to focus on one thing. Listen to your own breathing, or focus really specifically on chewing your food, and just really be present right in that activity and in that moment. And again, pay attention to what is going through your mind at that time. And that will again help you focus a little bit better and rein in your thoughts. This is also a really great technique to use when you're stressed. As class is starting, regardless of the class format, you need to be a good critical listener. And what that means is that you're really paying attention and you're really focusing on what's going on in class. That's a general way of describing it. In a more specific way, critical listening involves examining how we're listening and evaluating what people are saying. So not just passively taking it in, but actually listen to it. We can do that by repeating mentally. And as we're taking notes, we can really chew on what's being discussed and then ask questions about what we don't understand. One technique for critical listening is sort of evaluate what you're hearing, whether it's important or kind of important or not important, and then base your actions on that. Again, if it's important, definitely write it down, highlight, underline it. If it's kind of important, just write the important parts to it. And if it's not important, obviously don't write it down. Another aspect of critical listening is to listen with an open mind. And that means, again, we're not being passive and just taking in whatever everybody else says, but it means we're thinking about, okay, what are some of the different viewpoints to this? And rather than thinking immediately, I disagree, we want to weigh it on its own merits and at least consider what's being said. Don't automatically dismiss them. Remember that college is supposed to challenge your thinking. That doesn't mean that you're going to be brainwashed or that you should automatically change everything that you think. But approaching things with an open mind doesn't really mean you're going to change your mind, but it means that you're at least evaluating it and thinking about it and being open to being challenged. You also want to make sure that you're hearing the entire message and listening to it to get the full message. Again, sometimes we hyper-focus on details and miss the general idea. We can also get the most out of class by speaking up. And a lot of us, myself included as a student, are afraid of being embarrassed. And some of us are naturally shy. Others of us aren't that shy, but we're afraid that we're going to say something that's incorrect. And remember that, again, in class, that's your chance to be incorrect and be corrected and learn the right answer. Everybody's going to give incorrect answers sometimes. It's not a big deal. And sometimes those can lead to really fascinating discussions. Also, we sometimes think that we're going to ask a stupid question, and I'm not going to pretend that there are no stupid questions, but generally what you might think is a stupid question really isn't. And you're really asking for clarification, which is super important. And I find as an instructor, if I have one student who is willing to ask a question for clarification or ask a question that they need to know, usually 4 or 5 other students are nodding along in agreement and listening in and saying, oh yeah, I had that question too. Of course, a major part of participating in class is by taking notes. And it's important to do that because it's going to fill in some of the gaps and what might not be in your textbook. And this is where you're really going to get to gain information from your professor's expertise. Just as important is that you're going to find some of the material in your notes pop up on quizzes and tests. You want to make sure it's there. And also, really important to the learning process is that taking notes. Something happens in our brain, according to research, when we actually write things down and go through that process of it entering our ears, going through our brain, and then we are putting it down on paper. Something really clicks with that, and that helps us really grasp the ideas. In this presentation, we'll introduce you to a few different note-taking systems. Again, none of these is right or wrong or better than the other. You just got to find what works for you. Here you can see an example of the Cornell format, where you're going to divide your notebook paper into 2 major columns. Make sure you keep the one on the right a bit larger. And then you can kind of put the key points from the outline in the major categories or whatever over there on the left, and then the specific elements will be over there on the right. On this slide, we can see the outline format. I find most students are familiar with this one already. But again, we're going to put the main topic on the left side of the page. And then as you kind of get into very specific parts within those major categories, you're going to put them down below them with Roman numerals and then letters and then numbers to kind of show the importance level of each one of those things. Here you can see the paragraph format. This one is going to focus on larger concepts and then lots of details that might be within those larger concepts that might all relate more together and may not be as easily captured by an outline. Again, the drawback of this particular format is that it can all kind of run together and be harder to study, but at the same time it can make ideas gel together a little better too. And here's a list format, which basically does somewhat of the same thing that an outline format might do, but so whereas you have larger ideas and then smaller ones kind of shown in importance underneath those, but you're not using an outline format with specific Roman numerals and things like that. The other nice thing about this is that you can kind of set it up so it is a little bit like the Cornell format where you space things out and have definitions and explanations shifted over more toward the right. We're going to run through a few key points on note-taking techniques. First of all, is you really do want to focus on main ideas and make sure that you find a way to set those apart. Your instructors should and hopefully are doing that in class as well by emphasizing these main ideas, writing them on the board. Maybe they have PowerPoint presentations that they're using and they're going to make those sections bolder or in bigger print. You can kind of see that we're doing that in these PowerPoints as well. Key point here, don't try to write down every single thing. That can make you lose focus. You're never going to keep up. One of the things that shows that students who try to take notes on laptops tend to transcribe, which means get everything down. And again, they tend to miss the key points as a result, and they don't do quite as well. In fact, you should really be as brief as possible. Again, that way you can focus on really key words and phrases. Sometimes it helps to use abbreviations for some of the smaller filler words that you need to use to connect words. And make sure that you're using your notebook wisely, including some space to go back and write more ideas or notes. And again, make sure that you put notes for yourself. So, for example, if you don't understand it, put a question mark to it and circle it or something. With math and science courses, of course, you can write down equations, formulas, very important things from those that you want to come back to. Sometimes you do want to quote the instructor's words if they're giving very specific directions or, again, formulas. Learn some of the standard symbols and abbreviations for that specific class. A lot of times you can find those in the instructor's materials or the textbooks. And again, if you're working on problems and answers and those things, you want to write down those specific steps on there. One of the key aspects to having notes is that you're going to want to review them. So use your notes. Don't just take them and hope that things sink in really well by just taking notes. Go back and review them. And not just when you're cramming for a test, but again, maybe a day or so later, right after class is a good idea. And again, that's a good way to help that material be going into your brain a repetition of times, not just once in a while, and then it'll sink in and stay with you longer, especially when you need it for a test. Part of getting the most out of every class, too, is going back and looking at your class notes and making sure you're doing the best techniques with your homework. So, of course, doing what's assigned to you and not giving up. Again, the whole point of homework is to give you practice before some of the larger stakes issues. And if you've just given up and not really gone all the way through it, you're not going to get as much out of it, and you'll be less prepared for later items that are worth more points. Here are some key notes for review. First of all, make sure that you're preparing for class before class starts. Make sure that you're practicing behaviors of effective learning during class. That includes listening attentively and having mindfulness. Taking notes, contributing to class discussions, etc. Make sure that you review notes before class so that you have a list of questions that maybe you can ask the instructor, or maybe see if they get clarified in this next class session. Maybe even ask other students for help. Figure out what kind of note-taking works best for you and work hard to make that even better. And again, remember there are some good strategies for taking notes that you can implement to get the most out of every class.